Appalachian State hires Dowell Loggains. Initial thoughts. Major skeptic over here on this side. Major. That was initial thoughts, right? But then you have to look at it, right? And then you have to be like, all right, so I'm skeptical. So it wasn't a name that I maybe expected. Like, man, if Charlotte can get Tim Alvin, what is Appalachian State going to do? They got a Power 5 coordinator in Dowell Loggains, a guy with NFL experience. But this was a point that you brought up to me off air, so I'll give you credit for it. Where has he been and where has he left that a fan base was like, oh, shoot, Dowell Loggains is leaving?
South
Dowell
Carolina.
Loggains,
That's it. Maybe, yeah.
that's a maybe.
Maybe the Bears. I mean, Jay Cutler was pretty good in 2015, but I know as Bears fans, like, we didn't love Dowell Loggains for whatever reason. Maybe no fault of his own, but I think it's something notable. Like, and he just keeps getting jobs, and all of a sudden he tries his luck out in college, and then 3, 4 years later, boom, he's a head coach of a pretty damn good program. Like Appalachian State is one that, yes, they're new to FBS. I get that, but it's still a legit program in the Sun Belt, without a doubt.
I mean, look, South Carolina, maybe they were a very good rushing attack this year, and I think you can credit him and that staff for getting that offensive line more prepared this year for an attack like that. But it took a while to get that going. And even with as great of a rushing attack as they had, and you have a dynamic threat at quarterback, you are still in like the bottom third in college football in the red zone. And you didn't have a good passing attack despite having numerous weapons, which we talked about in the preseason, being like, hey, look up at these names, because South Carolina has names at this wide receiver position. It ended up being Rocket Sanders and our lovely quarterback over there that we looked at, and they ended up just using them as offensive weapons. They felt like there was still just a lot of other weapons on the team that were underutilized. And I look at Appalachian State, and we'll talk about expectations when we bring up grades because, boy, is it high at Appalachian State. Okay, how many G5 programs do you go and you're like, okay, this team has never had a losing season since they rejoined the FBS within the last decade. And the first time they have a losing season, they win 5 games because one of their games was canceled because of a natural disaster, a game that which they could have won against Liberty. So you don't lose that 6-win margin, you don't make it to a bowl game, and you just get immediately can. Immediately can. I mean, they had a winning season every other season. And in the first year, they barely don't have a winning season. It's like, yeah, see ya. A guy that was loyal, Sean Clark was loyal to the Mountaineers. He wanted nothing but success for that program. He wasn't looking for other jobs. Like, that was where he was, and he loved to be in Boone, North Carolina. And I don't know that Dowell Loggains wants to stay there in Boone, North Carolina. I don't know if this is to him a stepping stone job. I don't know. He's never been a head coach before. So my skepticism, even as I'm looking into this and trying to look at this in a positive light, my skepticism is still real.
I can't disagree with you there. I cannot disagree with you there. It is interesting. This is one that did surprise me, right? When it did happen. Now I don't know if Appalachian State fans, this was a long time coming for you, or if you're like, okay, we need something. But here's the thing, like you got mad at Clark. You cut ties with him after one tough season. Like, what's gonna happen when Loggins like struggles at the beginning? Like, because this is his first head coaching job, right? Anywhere he's been, and you step into a program like Appalachian State, high pressure, right? Obviously, high rich tradition and program success and all that kind of stuff, and the infrastructure is there to win for sure. Like, this is different than some of the other jobs I think on the market here. We talked about certain reasons why jobs open in the first place. Sometimes because your program has too much success where your coach ends up heading out somewhere else for greener pastures, and you get to kind of a coach comes in and gets to kind of continue that momentum going, or you need a program reset and you had a real mess to take over. This is not like somewhere in between there where you've got a program that is going the right way. It's just the coach was fired, potentially, on a short leash, and you had to step in there. And yes, what he did at South Carolina, I will say I was impressed. I did think he did help, with Spencer Rattler and getting him drafted and putting people around him. Also developing a guy like Xavier Legette as well. He did help develop Lenore Sellers. It was going to take some time. This was a young kid. Yes, they struggled early on. They let Old Dominion game look gross and ugly. And we saw in even the Kentucky game, some of the wins early in the season were still gross and ugly, but you saw him get really, really hot at the end. And I do credit Loggains for that and the success that, Rattler or that Sellers did have and will continue to have. We talked about there is that relationship there between Sellers, and Loggains and how close knit they are. At Arkansas, too, he did have success as a tight ends coach. You talk about recruiting Ty Washington, Lucas, like a couple guys really talented in their own right at Arkansas. That's where he got his degree from, was a walk-on quarterback there, eventually earning a scholarship. So great story there for him. But it's interesting. It is really interesting. You know, he was making $1 million at South Carolina, so plenty of money there. He's also made plenty of money throughout his career. It's not like this is some kind of, I need to make some money here for your family, but he had a good job at South Carolina, and like he wanted to take this job. This is to me an interesting spot because it is a great job, and I don't blame him for it at all. Also, the good news for App State is that there is no buyout because in his contracts clause, in his buyout clause, like if he left his spot for a head coaching job, right, he didn't have to pay a buyout, which is fantastic. They did not release the actual, monetary, amount for his annual salary that Dowell Loggains will make at Appalachian State, but it's going to be somewhere between 1.5 to $3 million. I know it's kind of a big range, but somewhere around there. So it's going to be a step up in his salary for sure. Obviously, a significant step up in responsibilities as a head coach. It will be a 5-year deal, which is awesome. But it's something to keep note that it is his first head coaching opportunity. I'm going to keep saying that because I do think it's important. And for a guy that, yeah, has had success, but also has been fired from plenty of places before, it's just really, really interesting that this program in this athletic department decided to go with Loggains, who I'm sure they had plenty of other options to go with. What about Loggains made them so enamored with him and his ability, obviously offensively, his calling card and success there that they can have in building this program back up to, Sun Belt contender and a college football playoff contender in that G5 spot, without a doubt. It's really, really interesting. And, obviously we're not the highest on them, but we're going to give them benefit of the doubt, give them a chance to earn a spot there at App State. Obviously root for them. We love when App State's doing well. College football is better, I think, when you've got some teams in the Sun Belt that are pretty darn good and competitive. And yeah, it'll be really, really interesting. I don't know. I don't know. It's very odd. It's very odd.
Now, I wouldn't be surprised by like a first year surge, like I wouldn't be surprised if it worked out, to be honest. I'm skeptical, right? But also too, I mean, he has the talent coming in from the transfer portal is good. Look at the quarterback position. Are you serious? AJ Swan and JJ Cole competing for QB1 at App State after Joey Aguilar leaves? Unbelievable. That for a G5 program, that is crazy to have that kind of competition. That's nuts. Think about the Power 5 schools that would beg to have that kind of competition. Think about it. Am I wrong?
No, no, not at all. Those are no, no. You first of all, you've got a proven guy in the SEC, AJ Swan, and you've got
Yes.
a high upside guy in JJ Cole. Like that is amazing, amazing roster construction, by Dowell Loggains.
But if you don't win, it just makes it that much worse because your expectations are so much higher. If I was a college football coach, like taking over a program like Appalachian State would really make it. Obviously, the guys that are being the head coaches of these programs are different people.
Elite
They
competitors.
elite competitors, right? So like he wants to win there. I know that, and maybe he can. But those expectations are so high. It is you have to compete for the Sun Belt Championship every year or you're done. That's it. No
In
offense or buts.
in a spot in college football where it is harder to win at the G5 level than it has ever been.
And by the way, the Sun Belt Conference, have we talked about this the last several years? The Sun Belt Conference may be the best G5 conference, most competitive, most talent depth conference that there is. South Alabama has a new coach that I think did pretty. That well, we'll see how he does.
Yeah.
Arkansas State. Okay, Butch Jones is doing better things there, right? Offensively, I mean, go up and down the list. Southern Miss now hires Charles Huff. Watch out!
A
Like,
lot of good coaches.
and that's a program that has plenty of resources. Both of the Georgia schools. Georgia State's in a worse spot than Georgia Southern, but Georgia Southern can get you on any given. With Clay Helton there and that offense, like it is a never-ending gauntlet in there. The only team that you could maybe be like, okay, well that's not a great program. They don't have a lot of resources. Is freaking Will Monroe, who freaking with Brian Vincent did fantastic.
In year one.
And you won. This is the expectations are high and it's gonna be tough. So I can't help but factor that in my grade. We talk about grades. Again, we'll reiterate this every time we talk about grades. B is meeting expectation and A is exceeding expectations to us and a C is not meeting expectations. You have to factor in those expectations for these grades. Otherwise, I don't know, Bill Belichick gets an A automatically and, you know, a guy like Zach Kelly at FAU gets a D, But you just have to factor in expectations with these programs, and they're just too high for me for Dowell Loggains. But we'll talk about that later. Do you have any comments on the staff here?
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting because Dowell Loggains has been in college 3 years, college coaching for 3 years. So a lot of these program coaches have cut their teeth through the D2, the FCS, then G5, then the Power, and all this kind of stuff. And here he is, and kind of comes reverse. Starts the NFL and comes his way back to college. So his coaching tree is a little bit different, and his connections he has is a little bit different than some of these coaches that we've talked about. So obviously, we'll start. He does have an assistant head coach. All right, it's gonna be Clyde Christensen. This is that NFL intrigue there. So he was a senior advisor to UNC, the head coach there, Mac Brown, in 2024. But before that, he was with Tampa Bay Bucks as the quarterbacks coach for Tom Brady. So not too bad there. The offense coordinator will be Dowell Loggains, so he will be calling plays. So obviously keep that in mind when you're doing these numbers about the staff, and all that kind of stuff. What's that look there?
And just again, we'll see.
It's a lot to put on your plate. Like it's a lot in year one to put on your plate as new head coach. But yes,
And there's no one to point the finger at. By the way, if you're calling plays and there's no one to point the finger at.
but this is also like that's why you bring him in though. Like calling his offense is his calling card. Like that's why you hire him too. And also like if it hits, like you have him calling plays for as long as he's at App State, which is
True.
the running back coach is going to be a Sean Larkins. He was most recently at Dartmouth coaching defensive backs there, but it's also been with Ole Miss and Michigan. His background is mostly defensive backs, so we'll see how that kind of works out as he transitions over to running backs there. Wide receiver coach Joe Daly. He was at Boston College, at the Carolina Panthers, at Kansas as well. Most recently at Hampton, but at Boston College, right? You coached Zay Flowers, developed him. You have DJ Moore with the Carolina Panthers, so obviously some pretty high level talents that he's worked with before. The offensive line coach is going to be Alan Mogridge. He was on Georgia Tech's offensive staff, with offensive line guru Brent Key. Kind of like to see that kind of flavor there. He also worked with Key back at UCF and made a really, really good rushing attack at where he both of those places where he's been. Excuse me. Quarterbacks coach is going to be Riley Watkins. He was Arkansas, Missouri, South Carolina. He worked with Loggains at South Carolina the past couple seasons. He's super, super young, right? Very, very young. Obviously, a little bit of high riser, and it's going to be nice to have Dowell Loggains to have someone he's familiar with being his quarterbacks coach and how, interchangeably they'll be working together. Ryan Urachek is going to be the tight ends coach. He was with Watkins and Loggains at South Carolina the past couple seasons. He was the assistant tight ends coach there for South Carolina, who helped develop Joshua Simon, pretty good tight end for them. Defensively, which we talked about, like He's an offensive guy, so defensively, especially in year one, you have to hit on this side staff, especially at the defensive coordinator level, right? So the defensive coordinator is going to be DJ Smith. He's also going to be the linebackers coach. He was his co-defense coordinator at Missouri this past season. He's been at Missouri for a little bit there. He learned from Blake Baker, right? Pretty darn good defensive coach there. He was also at App State back with Eli Drinkwitz. So that's how he got to Missouri. It was with Eli Drink, went to Missouri from App State. But he was at App State from 2018 to 2019. Love that kind of familiarity there. I think, fans will remember him. DB coach is going to be Curtis Fuller. He was the cornerbacks coach at Coastal Carolina past 2 seasons, was also a cornerback in the NFL out of TCU. He's coached at Carolina. So he's familiar with the Charlotte area. Also coached high school at Myers Park High School. So I love the North Carolina, connections there. He also, like at Coastal Carolina, developed pretty darn good corners as well. The edge coach is going to be Anthony Shakir. He'll also be serving as the defensive recruiting coordinator. He was the D-line coach at Ball State this past season, and then was at Chattanooga, East Tennessee. So it's kind of around, that not too far from the Appalachian there. Shakir was a member of App State defense staff from 2018 to 2020. He was a defensive analyst in that big 2018 season where they went 11-2, and then also a quality control assistant for the defense during that 13-1 season back in 2019 where they hit it big. The D-line coach is going to be Keith Jones Jr. He was coaching defensive line with the Patriots the past couple seasons, so that's where that NFL flavor kind of comes in again. He also worked with Loggains back at Arkansas in 2022, where Jones was a GA. He also played defensive line at UT Martin. So we'll see. Obviously, it's a lot of young, new, different names, I think, than that kind of get passed around in the coaching world before. But listen, I mean, it's a big staff, very important staff. I'm sorry for Dowell Loggains because he's going to be drinking through a fire hose because of all that kind of stuff he's going to be going through because of how high the expectations are at Appalachian State. Like you said, we'll see if it works out on paper. It looks fine offensively. I mean, you trust Dowell Loggains to get that right. He's got some connections, some nice names there. Defensively, we'll see how DJ Smith does as a full-time play caller there with a lot of responsibility on his lap, leading that defense. We'll see. We will see.
Yeah, and defense matters because they have not been good on the defensive side of football, and it would it'd be a very strong argument to argue that, yeah, a huge reason that Sean Clark got fired was because the defense was just abysmal. And they did not perform in a conference where defense matters because you have explosive playmakers on the outside. Think about how many good wide receivers are in the Sun Belt. How many good running backs there are. There's also some good offensive lines. You're losing almost your entire offensive line this offseason, so that'll be an interesting look for Dowell Loggains, how he wants to replace that. I know he's already gotten some guys from some lower levels to kind of help replenish that, but competitive quarterback room, competitive running back room, competitive wide receiver room. Got to get that defensive staff higher right. See from there. It's impossible to know. You say this every time, how the staff is going to work out, who's going to be in the long haul. I do like an NFL flavor, especially on the defensive side of the ball. We'll see. We'll see. He's not going to have the benefit of a top 5 defense in the country like he did last year.
No.
He's not. It's just not going to happen.
So we'll see. I'll give my expectation, my grade right now. Obviously, we've talked about expectations pretty thoroughly. It's competing for Sunbelt, right? I want to go to solid bowl games, right? Do not have losing seasons at all, right? And then also get back to being a pretty frequent name in the NFL draft, right? You've produced some solid talent, Darrington Evans, right? A bunch of other guys too. You've had legit draft picks. You have that NFL flavor with Dowell Loggains. Use that. Have that be one of your pitches in your recruiting process where you are developing guys to the NFL and also retaining them a little bit. Obviously, some players are going to leave. Some players are going to get poached. I get that. That's the reality. That happens to every single program, by the way. Alabama lost 2 of their better players, and a couple of their better players. And, they won national championships there. And that was Nothing they can do about it, right? So it happens to everyone, but compete. I'll go C plus here. Again, you know, we gave you the good with the bad, right? We're honest here on our program. Like we I'm not crazy high on this hire. I want it to work out without a doubt. I am skeptical because of a lot of the reasons we talked about. First year head coach, big responsibilities, high expectations. I think he can win 6 games a year without a doubt. But
100%.
is that going to keep his no? And that's still not the expectation. It should be higher than that for sure. So, we'll see. Obviously, a lot has to remain and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm a little lower. I got a C minus, which is right now of the coaches that we reviewed the lowest grade that I've given a coach. Coaching hire, I should say, not a coach. I think Dowell Loggains is. I've been a little bit negative about him from a coaching aspect. I don't think he's necessarily a bad coach. I just think it's for a first time head coach and a guy that maybe is inflated to be better than he actually is. And again, he could totally prove me wrong. And this is a program where you can win, because of the culture that's there, because of the fan base, because of the money, because of the geography. He has everything you can possibly want to win. And I think he could totally do that. I just don't think he's necessarily going to meet the high expectations of winning 8, 9, 10 games a year. Like that, unfortunately for him, that's the expectation.
Yeah.
So, and I, I think that's hard to beat. There are not a lot of guys that they could have hired that would be like, okay, yeah, this guy, now that, yeah, they're going to win 9, 10 games every single year. And just with how competitive the Sun Belt is and will be in the future with some of these new coaches in there, I just, I find it very hard, very, very, very hard to believe that, that he's going to meet expectations. So I give it a C minus for that reason. Doesn't necessarily mean I think he's a bad coach. I think he would do great at a program like Georgia State, right? I think he would do great in certain Power Four schools as an offensive coordinator. I just have my doubts about him as the head coach at Appalachian State.